Okay, 7:30. So good evening and welcome to the Richmond Society. I'm Barry May, the Society's chairman. Before we introduce our speaker, a few notes. Please keep your microphone muted to suppress any background noise. The proceedings are being recorded, so if you don't want to be seen, switch off your camera. And if you wish to ask a question, use the chat function. For those of you who don't know us, the Richmond Society is a civic and amenity charity that has been caring for the town's natural and built environment for more than 60 years. We love Richmond and we want future generations to enjoy it as much as we do. Everything is done by local volunteers, so if you'd like to help, please get in touch. If you're not already a member, do join us. It's easy, sign up on the website for only £10 a year. This evening's programme has been arranged by Andy Dowding, who joined us a few months ago as our events trustee. He will now introduce our speaker and, as a bonus, a surprise guest. Andy.
Thank you, Barry, and good evening, everyone. Our surprise guest isn't really a surprise because you're looking at him. I suppose the thing that could confuse you is we have two guests and they're both called Manoj, as far as Zoom is concerned. I don't want to take up any of your time with me talking because we have the most fantastic pairing of talkers tonight. Neither of whom really require any introduction at all, but just briefly, Manoj Badale, well known as co-owner of the Rajasthan Royals, but also serial entrepreneur and kind of local boy. Manoj, I came under some scrutiny by not really being able to say you were from Richmond, but you are from the neighbouring borough, which is good enough for me. And Manoj will be interviewed by Simon Hughes, confusingly also with Manoj under his name. And you will all know Simon, former pro cricketer, journalist and broadcaster, known as the analyst by those of us, you know, those cricket nuts amongst us. Thank you both so much for giving us your time tonight, which I know is very valuable. Very chuffed to be handing over to both of you for what I'm sure will be a brilliant evening. Thank you, and over to you, chaps.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andy. A lovely introduction, and from your colleague as well, Barry, because I run a virtual cricket club as well, and or a virtual club once a week, and I never give that kind of meaty information at the start about how to join and what the events are going to be. So that was a good education in how to introduce a program or a show, whatever. Just a bit of background. Manoj and I have known each other for probably 25, 30 years. Actually, somebody on Twitter recently posted an interview that Manoj did with me when he was a mad young cricket fan supporting Middlesex and I was playing, and he interviewed me about life as a professional cricketer. And of course now he's the guy organising the professional cricketers and paying them, and you know, making a fair bit of money himself. So you know, things sort of switched around the other way really. And we've sort of talked a lot about the game and run little coaching courses for our kids and stuff for years. And then when Manoj got involved in the IPL, I was sort of involved a little bit on the periphery, took a lot of interest in the development of the game. I've always been interested in the game's innovations and development. And then we came up with this book idea a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, to sort of try and encapsulate, I suppose, all the learnings that Manoj has gained from 10, 12 years of running an IPL team, and you know, marry that with my kind of interest and enthusiasm and sort of knowledge of the game as well. So it's been a kind of interesting juxtaposition of thoughts and minds, I suppose. Manoj, well, I suppose the first question is, why did you write the book, or why did we write the book now? Why did you want to bring out all those thoughts and ideas and concepts now?
Yeah, look, before I answer the question, firstly, Andy, thanks for the invitation to be here. You know, what I can say is my children have played for Richmond Cricket Club, Richmond Hockey Club, and Richmond Rugby Club. So Richmond is dear to our family, even if I don't live there. So hopefully that qualifies. But look, Simon, as you know, in fact, because you inherited, you know, what was, you know, 100 pages of stories from those early years. The book's been a multi-year project, in the sense that it sort of started out for me. I mean, unlike you, I'm not a writer. I'm not an author. But I used to, the IPL was such an extraordinary roller coaster, particularly in those first 3 to 5 years. You know, I'd come into the office every day and, you know, share the latest story with Charles, my business partner. And, you know, we'd sit there and go, you know, you couldn't script this, you couldn't script this. So it actually started just as a cathartic way of keeping a record of all of those crazy events. And, you know, I mean, within the first 5 years, we'd won the competition. The competition had been launched. $1 million cricketer had been born. We'd been terminated. We'd been involved in spot fixing. I mean, you know, you literally couldn't make it up. And so the honest answer to the question is, it started just as almost as a minor form of therapy to write these stories down on the basis that no one would ever believe them if I hadn't actually written them down. And it was only when you and I got chatting about how to make that interesting for the reader and how to, and the sort of also the realization, having shown it to a few lawyers, that most of what was in there could never be published. It was only when we got chatting that it sort of, I think it was through those early conversations that we realized that actually a lot of what I was writing about and a lot of what I was learning was about the complexities of the business of cricket. And while some people on the call and some people generally kind of get offended when you talk about the business of cricket or the business of sport, the reality is it is a business now. Sport is more important in our lives than it ever has been. A huge growth industry, and cricket, for those of us that are cricket fans, and you and I have had so many dinners talking about this, you know, has peaked and been in troughs, and the sustainability of the game has been questioned. And I think it was when you and I sat there that dinner and said, yeah, if we could put together a book that actually helped inform the long-term business viability of the game, that would be a good thing. There's two people who've loved the game, played the game, been involved with the game for 40 years. I think you remember that dinner when we said, let's try and put something together that informs the viability and sustainability of the game. And then, of course, and you know this better than anyone, I think we were going to publish it at the back end of 2019. And we said, no, let's wait until nearer the IPL, which was obviously supposed to be at the start of 2020 in March. And lo and behold, I think it was literally the week before we were going to go into publishing, I called you up and I said, Simon, we can't publish this. I mean, this coronavirus is, just feel so strange to publish a book about the future viability of the game when this thing had just literally arrived in our lives called the coronavirus. And I remember you being a bit frustrated with me and saying, come on, let's just publish it. And I said, no, but this is going to change everything. I promise you, this is going to change everything. And so we actually, frustratingly for you and for me, we sort of let it sit for about 2 months. And then we came back to the project. And actually what was so fascinating about the impact of coronavirus is, for the first time, the business of sport, the economics of sport, the viability of the ECB, the viability of counties, the viability of sports clubs was a mainstream topic. And it was a mainstream topic because for the first time in our lives, all sport was shut down. And I remember another conversation with you saying, we've got to write a new chapter on the impact of coronavirus. And then you came up with that sort of brilliant idea of closing every chapter with a connection to coronavirus. And then we changed the front cover from a cricket ball hitting the stumps to a coronavirus hitting the stumps, because the two things that are truer than they've ever been are that the business of sport is becoming more important than it has ever been, and that the impact of the pandemic and coronavirus has made sports fans realize that they can't ignore the viability of the sport if we're going to grow up in a world where our grandkids play as much cricket as we did. Sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but
no, I mean, no, you did answer the question. I mean, a lot of people will slightly sort of be horrified that sport is business, and why can't sport just be sport? Why can't it just be fun? Why can't it just be a game? Why can't it just be like it was 25 years ago, And what is the answer to that?
The answer to that is sport is a subset of the world of leisure and entertainment. And there are more competing demands and pulls with the advent of social media, the advent of the internet, the advent of computers, the advent of mobile phones, is for sport to maintain its presence in that world of entertainment. Sport has to evolve, sport has to grow, and sport has to compete. And if you don't recognize that, what you are effectively going to do is relegate sport to an ever smaller niche. That's one dimension. The second dimension is that any industry needs capital and investment to grow. And so how that sport gets that capital and investment becomes incredibly important. I mean, when people talk about the amateur game, the amateur game only exists because of the subsidies that it gets from the professional game. So it's not like there are two different versions of the game. And wouldn't it be nice if only the amateur game existed? Because if only the amateur game existed, it would quickly dwindle and disappear. That's the reality. And as someone who loves sport, loves cricket, and is passionate about it, and as someone that spends his day job working in the world of technology, working with reasonably disruptive businesses, and seeing the pace of change that's possible in areas like financial services or education, one of the things I've always found frustrating about sport and sports bodies and sports administrators is they don't recognize the pace of change that they now have to move at if they're going to survive. So this is not some sort of romantic notion of growth. This is about survival ultimately.
One of our chapters is called, or one of the sections of a chapter is called Fantasy Sport for Real, or Fantasy Cricket for Real. And the idea of it being that you as the owner of a team in the IPL have the opportunity to you spend, I don't know, what is it now, $12 million. $12 million, you have a pot of $12 million to buy your ideal team. So it is a bit like playing fantasy football or something. You can pick, especially at the start, you had a completely open book of who you wanted to choose. But has it been, being an owner for 12 years of an IPL franchise, has it been a dream or has it been a bit of a nightmare?
Bit of both. Bit of both. I mean, there's no question. I mean, the first year happened so quickly, as you will remember. That was almost like a fairy tale where this, we acquired the cheapest franchise, the only thing that everyone in India agreed on, all the great and the good, all the cricket experts said, this is the team that will finish last, because we'd spent the least on our players. We'd spent about 50% of what everyone else had spent. We were foreign owned. I mean, even though it might seem strange to people on this call, I am viewed as a foreigner in India. So we were foreign owned, which we didn't have a superstar Indian player. We were the only franchise that didn't have a superstar Indian player. There was an awful lot of things going against us. And then to kind of go on and win that first season against all odds was a fairy tale. And of course, the IPL, which I couldn't get any of my friends in West London interested in the slightest, suddenly went from obscurity to being the most talked about thing in the world of cricket in the space of, the franchises were awarded in January, the first ball was bowled in April, and the final was in the middle of May. I mean, this thing moved very, very quickly. And India's a big country. And for a tournament that was nothing more than a piece of paper, to have 700 million eyeballs on its final 13 weeks after inception, I mean, that's never happened anywhere in the world, in any sport, in any situation, with any movie, with any film. So that was like a fairy tale. But that's what, I always talk about in business, successful company syndrome. And I think part of the challenge was that first year, both for the IPL and for the Rajasthan Royals, went so incredibly well. The tournament got complacent and we got complacent, and the inevitable interference of government started to get greater, as in India, the inevitable appearance of politics with a big P got bigger and bigger. And then within 3 years, we found ourselves at the wrong end of a determination. And I remember that day vividly going, my God, it's all gone. I mean, the dream asset has literally been taken away from you unjustly. And I spent the next year in the High Court, living a bit of a nightmare, actually, in a country that I know well, but not, I haven't been involved in litigation in 22 years. But, incredibly high profile litigation that involved, the government, the media. And that was as far from my comfort zone as possible. And then to have got the franchise back and rebuilt it, and then, become justifiably, if not the best team, one of the 2 or 3 best teams again, and then to have that exploded again by 3 of your players, it transpiring that they were spot fixing and then being suspended, and that whole, I mean, it literally was the definition, as you know better than anyone, of a 10-year roller coaster. And when we got suspended for the second time for 2 years, there was a big part of me that just said, this is so far from fun. When your name is in newspaper articles which carry in the same paragraph, the notion of spot fixing or foreign exchange violations. I mean, that's when the impact starts to affect your your core activity here in the UK. So there were many times when you just thought, actually, this is just too hard. But actually, then we decided, I think rightly, that if you quit, while you're suspended, and we had 2 or 3, as you know, offers to buy the franchise, people will always wonder, were they running away or was there something to hide? And so we then had a new mission, which was to relaunch and reclaim that brand, reclaim that territory, get that badge back. And I think we're part of the way to doing that.
Talk me through your chair. It looks like you've stolen something from a British Airways first class. It looks like a British Airways first class seat or something.
It's trying to intimidate you, Simon. It's trying to intimidate you.
It's a right old throne, isn't it? So,
actually, a link to the word throne. You asked me, why is sport so important? I mean, the other thing, of course, that people don't realize is live sports and news are the only 2 reasons why terrestrial television remains a viable product, right? So there are, in this on-demand catch-up world that we live in now, where none of our kids watch anything live, the only 2 things that are watched live are the Game of Thrones, hence the chair, and live sports. And so live sports is not just important for sports fans, it's important for huge parts of our media industry that would otherwise disappear. Without coronavirus and live sport, I mean, there are no people watching live sports.
Look at the way the big media companies like Amazon are trying to muscle in Facebook. They're trying to muscle in on live sport because they know that's a route to more viewers, users, and then their data as a result. I'm quite jealous of the IPL really, because if I go back to my career, when you start out as a professional cricketer, you want to play for England. That's the kind of, I suppose, the initial objective. And I kind of really, early on, I realised I probably wasn't quite good enough to play for England, but I might be on the fringes. So the thing I looked forward to most of all as a professional cricketer was Sunday League cricket, because Sunday League, 2 o'clock start, many of our viewers, audience tonight will remember this, 1980s, 2 o'clock start, 6:30 finish, get down the pub for 7, have 4 hours of entertainment, all the best players in the world playing county cricket in the 1980s, which I think probably was the cricket's second golden age. The first golden age is regarded as sort of the 1890s, and the second golden age was the 1980s because of so many great players. And the Sunday League was fantastic because it was 4 hours of entertainment, it was 40 overs, it was, hit and giggle and, smash it around, and lots of people came. And it was live on BBC Two every day, every Sunday. So for me, that was the day you could show off that was the day you could, exhibit your skills. You felt it was, it was viable because people were coming through the gate and they really loved it. And I suppose in a way, if you wonder why the IPL has been so successful, and you can tell us how successful, it's because it's entertainment at a time when people can and want to watch.
I think that's right. And funny enough, I've not thought about the John Player League, right? The 40 over game. Is that the same tournament, Yoz, where you got hit for a 6 in the last over to lose the game against Maharashtra? Was that a different tournament?
That was the NatWest.
That was different. I just thought I'd remind you of that, publicly, just in case you'd forgotten.
Yeah.
But look, the John Player League. Actually, I've not thought about this before you started romantically describing it. But the John Player League I remember the first cricket match I ever went to was Lancashire Middlesex in the John Player League, and the point of that is it was a much more accessible form of the game for youngsters. The John Player League was always on the same time. It was on a time when it was on a time when, and everyone knew what time the game started. They all started at that time. There was never a question about it. And it was also on at a time when families could go and watch cricket, as opposed to, in the middle of the day when fathers and mothers were working. And actually, in essence, that adherence to an appointment to view, that focus on broadening the audience, and that focus on delivering a consistent product, those are 3 of the 5 or 6 reasons why the IPL has been successful. If I ask people to tell me when, first of all, if I ask people to name what tournaments are taking place in England this year, no one has a clue. I mean, we've got a World Test Championship final. We've got 2 2020 tournaments. We've got 3 different countries touring, playing 4 different formats. 4 different countries playing 4 different formats. And we've also got a 4-day county championship game that about 55 people will watch in total. And we're trying to launch a brand new format that's going to change the future of the game. I mean, it's just, if you said that to any businessman, here's my business plan for the summer to revitalize the game, they'd think you're mad. The first thing they'd say to you is, you're going to confuse the audiences. You're going to confuse the customers. You're going to cannibalize audiences. What's the difference between the Vitality and the 100? What's the, do I go to watch New Zealand in the Test? I mean, and this is what drives me nuts, which is the response of the administrators to the financial deficits that they're facing is to consistently put more into the schedule. When actually, there's a great phrase in the business of sport, which is less is more. Look at Wimbledon. Wimbledon, one of the hallmark events. Look at the Olympics, right? Wimbledon's 2 weeks long. It's the same 2 weeks every year. They don't try and move it around. We don't squeeze in a Wimbledon light in September. It's a product that we all look forward to, that has scarcity value, that we know when it is, where entertainment, consumer experience. I mean, the number of times I've been to Wimbledon and the experience just always seems to get 5% better because they're consistently investing in, it's a fan-centric product.
And the difference, of course, is that they don't have to sustain 18 counties, 18 professional tennis teams to mount Wimbledon every year. The problem with English county cricket is sort of fundamentally unsustainable because, as you said, only 55 people or, maybe 2,500 people watch it. Therefore, you've got to put on more and more games to make it pay. Otherwise, you're paying players to play a few games and earn nothing back. So,
there is no history, and there is no.
I agree with you about the rarity value, and it's totally jumbled up this year. It's so complicated. Just you mentioned the 100 there, and one thing I think everyone would be interested in here is the 100 is 8 new teams, 8 new city-based teams, and the IPL was 8 new city-based teams or regional-based teams. How do you create that allegiance, that engagement, that affinity with new teams in such a short space of time? And how can the 100, think about that?
It's a good question. I mean, you know, it's like everything, unfortunately, it goes back to economics. I mean, a huge investment in marketing is part of it. A huge investment in superstar players is part of it. High quality entertainment product. I mean, everyone forgets the IPL became huge, not just because it was in India, but because it is unquestionably the best domestic cricket that's played anywhere in the world. I mean, the quality of the cricket in the IPL is unrivaled. The new skills that have been developed, I mean, you know, whether it's the scoop shot, the ramp shot, the one-handed catch on the boundary, the one-handed flicking through, all of those skills were first developed in the IPL. So unfortunately, the answer to your question, Simon, is you don't compromise on the product. You don't compromise on the marketing. You don't compromise on the messaging, and you're consistent, right? In the same way, if I said to you, how do you launch a new brand of biscuits? You know, if there's someone here from P&G, that, you know, they'd come out with an answer similar to that. And of course, what we've had to do, because of the legacy challenges we have with unsustainable, non-financially viable county structures, is we've compromised on everything. We've compromised on the capital that's available to the 100. I mean, it's got a marketing budget of about £50 million, I think, or less. Yeah. We've compromised on the players. I mean, can you imagine launching a tournament in England where most English superstar players are unavailable for 2/3 of the tournament? So we've compromised on the product. We've compromised on the marketing budgets.
You sound as if you think it might struggle.
Look, you know, time will tell. I feel for the ECB because I think they've done a brilliant job to get us this far with all the constraints and barriers and hearts and minds that they've had to win. But I just hope that whether it succeeds or fails, people will recognize that these things, like any product launch, takes time. And that people will recognize that over time, it will only succeed and reach its potential if those compromises are removed.
Is allegiance to sport changing in the sense that, I mean, the traditional idea is, as you're Liverpool fan sort of through and through, Chelsea fan, whoever. I was a Spurs fan, and you're kind of with that for life, and it's almost a sort of a penance in a way if you are supporting not a very successful team. But I mean, the evidence of the IPL in a way is that people, they probably support their local team first, but they also support a team with a player that they like in another region as well, because players with their greater exposure through social media, etc., are, you know, we use this phrase content factories all the time, didn't we? They're generating content, they're sources of content all the time, players. Therefore, they get, you know, develop their own followings, which almost can usurp the following of a team.
Yeah, although actually I do think India is going the way of England in the sense that fans are staying with teams and having a primary IPL team, and kids are being given an IPL team at birth, and they support the team that their fathers or mothers support. So I do think that is going to happen, and it has happened. I'm not so sure the point you're making is that different for soccer. I look at my kids, and of course I've insisted that they be Liverpool fans, but they're also obsessed with Neymar and can name 15 or 20 superstars that play on the continent. And they can name every player, because again, the way kids are growing up with sport is completely different to the way you and I grew up with sport. A lot of their interaction is online. A lot of their interaction is through video games. A lot of their name recalling and allegiances are built through video games as much as they are through the actual live and real appearance itself. So, you and I have been looking at virtual reality and how that's going to impact the game over the next 3 to 6 months. So, look, I think allegiances will always be there. Tribal allegiances regional allegiance. Look at the Richmond Society. I mean, you know, we're always going to identify with regions and places where we are, but we're also going to have favourite players and superstar players. I don't think that's going to change.
I love the Richmond borough, by the way. I live in Hammersmith, but my girlfriend lives in Teddington, so I often drive through Richmond, and I believe it's the borough with the most either sports clubs or sports facilities in the country. It does feel like a very healthy. It was always quite low in the COVID ratings, wasn't it? And you know, Kingston Bridge is a favourite spot for me because there's just so many cyclists, rowers, and runners, you know, going through it or over it or under it or whatever. So I really love Richmond as a sort of sporting mecca, really, the borough. Well, one thing I would just like to pick up on. You say the IPL is has sort of moved the game on from a qualitative skill levels point of view. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is the analytics, and we do a chapter on, you know, how the analytics work in cricket and how the Royals were sort of pioneers in that way, and then other teams have caught up. But because of the analytics, you pitch the matchups are, you know, pitch an elite player who's particularly good between the 10th and the 14th over against a bowler who's also been identified because he's very good in the middle overs. So you're putting together the two best performers in each team in that little tiny period of play. So it really concentrates the talent. And one of those two players up against his elite opponent has to raise his game to excel. So as a result, you get that kind of competitive edge and improved performance. What about, well, I mean, I don't know if you've got any views on that. But
No. Look, I think, you know, as you know, I'm a bit of a geek with my day job. And so watching the evolution of an application of technology and data in cricket, even in the 12 years that we've had the Royals, has been extraordinary. You know, what we used to describe as, analytics and technology back in 2008. I mean, now, an IPL game is, it's 120 specific different events, really, and the amount of analysis that goes in to each game and each prep. I mean, it's fascinating.
I'm afraid I didn't hear any of that answer. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Simon.
The sound on your
Okay.
Screen above me has died, so I'm now not getting any sound. I'll come into your room and stand behind you or something. Just one more question, and then we can perhaps get the audience involved. What's the future for the Rajasthan Royals? I mean, you've got this academy in Surrey. You've also been sort of building academies in India. You've got plans to build academies elsewhere. How do you? I mean, obviously, you're a person who wants to grow things all the time. So how do you grow this franchise?
Yeah, we've got a pretty big, bold vision actually that we define as our sort of core purpose. You know, and that vision is we want to transform cricket and we want to transform India. And those are two very big statements. But I do believe over the next 5 years, cricket is going to transform at a rate that's going to shock your traditional cricket fan of today. And I also believe modern India is transforming and growing at a rate that is profound for the rest of the world. And I think when you've got the privilege of owning a franchise and a platform that's as visible and well known as the Royals, you've got to set some big goals. So, we've got a big social purpose that drives everything we do, and that's female empowerment. So, we're the first franchise to have a women's team, a girls' team, and we take 20% of our profits every year and direct them towards causes and organisations that are working in the area of female empowerment, because we think that's, particularly girl education, is the route to sort of changing society in India.
We are coming to a close now, so I guess I've got to go. I would like to thank them both and congratulate them also for awakening in our patron, Ian Bruce, a long lost and dormant interest in cricket. If nothing else, you've done something really tonight, I must say. And thank you so much, gents, for being with us this evening.
Yes.
Before you go, thank you for that. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, the 17th of June, with Richard Deverill, who is the director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and he will be talking about a new strategy for the gardens. That meeting, as usual, will be on Zoom, and tickets will be available on Eventbrite. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody, members and guests, for being with us this evening. Until next time, thanks, and stay safe, and good night.